Ever questioned the significance of following orders? It's a question that might seem simple, but its implications are far-reaching and complex. In our daily lives, we encounter orders in various forms, from the traffic lights that manage the flow of cars on our streets, to the rules of etiquette that guide our social interactions. Orders, in essence, are mechanisms that bring order to our lives. They provide structure, establish standards, and ensure the smooth running of our societies. Let's consider a sector where orders are paramount, the military. Here, obedience is considered the backbone of operations. Imagine a battlefield scenario with soldiers acting on their own whims rather than following a coordinated strategy. It would be chaos, wouldn't it? A potential catastrophe. This is why orders are so critical. They maintain discipline, foster teamwork, and ultimately can be the deciding factor between victory and defeat. Moving on to the corporate world, orders play a different but equally important role. They guide decision-making, define responsibilities, and streamline operations. A CEO, for instance, may issue orders to various department heads who in turn relay these instructions to their teams. This chain of command ensures that everyone is working towards a common goal. However, orders are not just for the battlefield or boardroom, they permeate every layer of our society. They are in the laws that govern our behavior, the school rules that shape our early years, and even in the social norms we're expected to adhere to. Yet, what happens when these orders are not followed? The potential consequences can be both positive and negative. On one hand, disobedience can lead to chaos, confusion, and even harm. On the other, it can challenge the status quo and pave the way for progress. However, there have been instances in history where individuals defied orders, leading to significant shifts in the course of events. Scene script. Rewind to 1789, where a mutiny aboard the British ship, the Bounty, changed the fate of its crew. Picture this. The Bounty, a small merchant vessel, is sailing in the Pacific Ocean under the command of Captain William Bligh. The ship's mission is to transport breadfruit plants from Tahiti to the West Indies. However, tensions are simmering beneath the calm surface. The harsh discipline imposed by Bligh is causing resentment among the crew, and the allure of Tahiti's idyllic life is too strong to resist. Enter our protagonist, Fletcher Christian, master's mate of the Bounty. He's a man torn between his duty to the crown and his sympathy for the disgruntled crew. As the ship sails further away from Tahiti, the crew's discontent reaches a boiling point. Christian, despite his better judgment, decides to act. One fateful morning, Christian and his supporters seize control of the ship. Bligh and those loyal to him are set adrift in a small, open boat. It's a bold, risky move. It's mutiny, a crime punishable by death. But for Christian and his men, it's a chance at a new life, a break from the rigid discipline of the Royal Navy. They sail back to Tahiti, pick up some Tahitian men and women, and then set off in search of a safe haven. Their journey ends at Pitcairn Island, a tiny, uninhabited speck in the vast Pacific Ocean. Here, they burn the Bounty to avoid detection and to sever their ties with their past. They are no longer mutineers. They are pioneers, building a new society from scratch. Their settlement on Pitcairn becomes a unique social experiment. Cut off from the rest of the world, the mutineers and their Tahitian companions create a community that survives isolated and largely self-sufficient for many generations. Defying orders in this case led to the creation of a new society in a remote part of the world. Fast forward to 1955, Rosa Parks, an African-American woman, defied an order that would spark a significant shift in the civil rights movement. This tale begins in Montgomery, Alabama, a city deeply entrenched in the unjust laws of racial segregation. Rosa Parks, a seamstress by trade and a secretary for the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, boarded a city bus after a long day at work. As the bus filled up, Rosa found herself in a situation that would become a defining moment in the struggle for civil rights. The bus driver ordered Rosa to give up her seat for a white passenger, as was the law in the segregated South. But Rosa Parks, weary from a lifetime of indignities, refused to comply. She had had enough of the prejudice and the discrimination, enough of the second-class citizenship. Her silent act of defiance, as simple as remaining seated, was a loud proclamation of resistance against unjust laws. This single act of defiance ignited a firestorm. 4 days after Rosa's arrest, the Montgomery bus boycott was launched, led by a young pastor named Martin Luther King Jr. For 381 days, African Americans in Montgomery refused to ride the city buses, choosing instead to walk or carpool, a collective act of protest that crippled the city's public transportation system. Rosa's refusal to give up her seat, more than just a personal act of defiance, galvanized a community, a nation, and ultimately the world. Her act became a symbol of the civil rights movement, a spark that lit the fuse for a long overdue fight for equality. Rosa Parks showed us that sometimes it's the simple acts of disobedience that can shake the foundations of an unjust system. In the history of those who changed the world by disregarding orders, Rosa Parks stands tall. Her quiet courage and unwavering resolve echo through the ages, reminding us of the power each of us holds to challenge and change unjust systems. Rosa Parks' refusal to follow an unjust order played a crucial role in the fight for equality. In 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, one man's defiance potentially saved the world from nuclear war. Enter Vasily Arkhipov, a Soviet naval officer aboard the B-59 submarine submerged in the Caribbean Sea. Tensions were at a fever pitch. The United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers holding the nuclear fate of the world in their hands, were locked in a deadly standoff. The B-59, cut off from communication with Moscow, was under the impression that war had already broken out. The submarine was surrounded by US Navy vessels, dropping depth charges to force it to surface. The commanding officers on board, believing they were under attack, decided to launch their nuclear torpedoes. But there was a catch. To launch a nuclear weapon, agreement from 3 officers was needed: the captain, the political officer, and the second in command, our man, Vasily Arkhipov. The first 2 were ready to launch, but Arkhipov was not. He argued against firing the torpedo, insisting that they surface and contact Moscow for further orders. Despite the mounting pressure, despite the perceived threat, Arkhipov held his ground. He chose to question, to challenge, to defy. His defiance was not an act of rebellion, but an act of responsibility, an act of humanity. Arkhipov's decision was not met without resistance. Tempers flared, voices were raised, but in the end, Arkhipov's defiance prevailed. The submarine surfaced, contact with Moscow was re-established, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. In the annals of history, Vasily Arkhipov's name may not be as well known as some, but his defiance, his decision to question authority in a moment of crisis, potentially saved the world from a nuclear catastrophe. His actions serve as a stark reminder that sometimes the most heroic act is not to charge blindly forward, but to pause, to question, and to make a decision based on wisdom and courage. Arkhipov's decision to defy orders demonstrated the importance of individual judgment in critical situations. As we've seen, defiance can sometimes change the course of history. The individuals we've discussed didn't simply follow orders. They exercised judgment, they stood their ground, and in doing so, they altered the world as we know it. Let's take a moment to reflect on the stories we've shared. The mutiny on the Bounty wasn't just about sailors rebelling against their captain. It was a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be oppressed, a vivid demonstration of what can happen when authority is abused, and the rank and file decide they've had enough. Then we discussed Rosa Parks, a woman whose act of defiance in the face of racial segregation became a pivotal moment in the American civil rights movement. She didn't just disobey an order, she challenged an entire system of injustice, proving that sometimes it's the quiet acts of rebellion that can echo the loudest. And who could forget Vasily Arkhipov? His refusal to launch a nuclear torpedo during the Cuban Missile Crisis likely saved the world from nuclear war. He demonstrated that even in the most dire of circumstances, the power of individual judgment can prevail. Each of these stories underscores the profound impact that disobedience can have, but they also highlight the importance of critical thinking, of questioning the status quo, and of standing up for what we believe is right. Disobedience isn't just about breaking rules, it's about challenging unjust systems, standing up to tyranny, and demanding change. And as history has shown us again and again, it's often those who dare to defy who end up making the biggest impact. So the next time you're given an order, think about it. Could your defiance change the course of history?